Well, good morning. I'm Nick LaFond. I run a surveying company called 1LS Surveying and having a discussion with Parker today from Indiana. And we're talking about workforce development, getting kids into surveying, and a newer outreach program that we developed called Surveyor's Quest. The general idea with that is to put the opportunity of surveying in front of high school kids and hopefully get them interested earlier in life compared to how most of us have got into it. How are you doing today, Parker?
I'm doing good, Nick. Yeah, this is a great joy being on here with you. Thank you. So I'm a young surveyor. I just got licensed last year, about a year ago now. I work for a company called Apex Consulting and Surveying in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I'm our survey manager over here, and we're about 30 people, not just surveying, also civil engineering, construction inspection, things of that nature as well. And I love surveying. So I'm very excited to be able to promote it to other people, especially young people or people of any age wanting to get into the profession. So this is a great blessing that we're able to do this. How about yourself, Nick?
I'm doing good. Glad to be talking about outreach in our workforce development problem.
Yeah, it's a big issue, isn't it? It's something I know I think about a lot. You and I have had a lot of conversation or a number of conversations about this, either through the different social media platforms or otherwise. So yeah, hopefully these videos will be some sort of a help to other people looking to get into surveying or expand their reach in surveying to the younger people looking to get in, or older people for that matter. you, you never There's always good chances for people later in their career to hop into something new. So
I don't know if you feel like I do, but it seems like the temperature's been turned up on this issue lately. And I'm noticing a lot of people that seem to be getting involved with the workforce development problem, whether that's NSPS or, different foundations that seem to be getting spun up. I think Debbie Edwards seems like he's doing something. Are you noticing some activity there?
yeah, I've definitely noticed it among people like you said, NSPS, Trent Keenan, people like that. So yeah, I think there has been a lot more talk and a lot more buzz about it as to what it's actually doing. I think, only time will tell. I was recently at a conference for our Indiana Society of Professional Surveyors, and there was about, I would say, 15 to 20 college students there who were in the surveying program at Vincennes University, which is in Southern Indiana, which I was incredibly surprised to see that. And they even had a little like meeting for all the college kids, and it was like a young surveyors network kind of deal. And there was about 20 20 people in that room, which was heartening. So I don't know how many will stay in Indiana, but even if they go to other states, of course, that helps the profession across the US.
Very cool. And that's your alma mater, right?
That is my alma mater. Yeah. Yep. So the program seems to be growing quite a bit. It's kind of odd that to consider it an alma mater for me, because I've never been on campus. So it was all online schooling, and I just kind of did the field stuff through work and some other things. So we met up for some labs, but then I've never actually been to Vincennes campus, interestingly enough.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess that's a testament to the online programs, huh? They can work.
They certainly do. Yeah. And even I don't recall if Vincennes has started doing this or not, but there are programs that will allow individuals to count their working hours. If they get a manager to sign off on them, they'll count that as field time or lab time instead of having to actually meet somewhere with the rest of the class. So that's also a huge improvement that I've seen in the educational sphere for sure.
I've heard that talked about here on the West Coast. I'm thinking that they're not allowing them to double dip right now on experience toward the license with time that's been done concurrently with the education. So I think that's for the younger people, it seems like something that they're actively pursuing some clarity on, with the idea that, hey, if I'm working full time, then wouldn't it make sense that this time can count?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And luckily Indiana has a nice part in their code that allows for some overlap of that, not the entirety of overlap. You can count up to 2 years of overlap, basically, if you are working full time while going to school. And so, especially if people are working full time and going to school full time, crazy people like that, you can you can bang it out in like 6 years, which is pretty great. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Yeah.
When I did my 4-year degree at Oregon Tech, it was all in person. There was no online programs back then in 2003. And I worked part-time, not every term. I took a pretty heavy credit load, and I was always amazed by the people that were in school and that were able to hold down a job while they're doing an engineering degree. Cause man, it's a lot of work to do that degree.
Yeah, it sure is. I did my first 2 years in an engineering program with a different school, and I was there full-time school, and then I worked about 20, 25 hours a week, and then had my first surveying class, fell in love, and never really looked back. I switched over to Vincennes. I started working full-time and going to school part-time then. And like I said, with that overlap issue, it pretty much allowed me to get done with my schooling, and then within 9 months, I was licensed. So with that schooling and overlap, schooling and experience overlap. So it was, Indiana has some pretty good perks, I think, for the licensure process. I don't, how is it in Oregon?
Well, that sounds like a fast track compared to Oregon. I started my education or my experience after college in California, and they had a requirement where you needed 1 year field plus 1 year office experience to add to the 4-year degree in order to get licensed. So a total of 6.
Mhm.
But I didn't finish out enough experience to get licensed there. I was just short when I got displaced in the 08-09 crash. And then when we moved back to Oregon and I got back into surveying in 2017, Oregon is 8 years total. So 4 plus 4, they count the 4 years education. And then I did the LSIT when I was a junior. So started accumulating the experience after that. And so it was 8 years. That was the fastest you could do it. And then if you were experience only pathway, I believe it was 12 years, 12 or 13. I think it was 12 years experience only pathway. But the board in the past few years reduced the amount of time. So now you can do it in 7 with the degree. So 3 years experience under an LS, and then they reduced the experience only pathway to 9 years. So I remember when they did that, one of my first thoughts was, wait a minute, I paid all this money to do this 4-year degree so I could get it in 8 years. The experience was, 3 years longer, and now it's only a year different. Is that really equitable for me? But, whatever, we have the need, for surveyors. So if that makes sense, then do it.
Yeah, I didn't know that Oregon had a no degree requirement. Is that, I guess I don't know how many states have that, but so you said it was 12 years for no degree. And then have they shortened that period as
Yeah,
well?
to 9.
To 9. Okay, so it's 7 or 9. Got it. Got it. Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah. I believe California is like that as well. They last I saw California, you can even become a lawyer without any education whatsoever. If you pass the bar, you can get your license, which I thought was very interesting.
Oh, let me make a note to do that.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. I believe, is it true that professional engineers in Oregon also, there's an experience only track?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
I remember seeing it. It was either Oregon or Washington. I can't quite recall.
Mhm.
One of them had it, at least last time I looked it up. And I thought that was interesting as well. But yeah.
Well, you want to jump into our 3 topics today?
Sure. So
Okay.
yeah, so we already discussed this, I guess, a little bit as regards licensing, but the differences between where I am and where you are. So Indiana versus Oregon, obviously there's a lot of similarities between the two, but talking about the differences is always interesting. So let's see. In Oregon, I'm sure you got a lot of mountains, right?
Yeah, we got a lot of mountains and we have a lot of deciduous evergreen trees, or deciduous and evergreen trees. So the trees everywhere makes the RTK a big challenge. I find that on the network, there's a lot of areas that I can't do a boundary survey with RTK, where if we set up a local basin rover, things are quite a bit better. But still, all these corners end up being underneath big trees. And so for the most part, when we're doing boundary, we're using the total station to get into those corners. Definitely not anything like Arizona and New Mexico, where you can do the majority of your work with the RTK.
Yeah. Do you guys get good residuals with your network on elevations if you're not having connection issues?
I would say in general, 5 to 600s vertical
Oh wow.
on the state's free network. We call that the ORGN.
Okay.
Trimble has some,
That's
and Leica have some paid networks, but I only have a little bit of experience with the Trimble. I don't pay for that one right now. I'd say even the DOTs, most of them are using the state's free network.
okay. That's pretty good. 5 or 6 hundredths compared to ours. We're lucky to get like a little under a tenth on ours. So we can't really use network for anything elevation. Now, the flip side out here is that we can use network a lot for boundary surveys because not nearly as much foliage and then definitely no mountains. I think our tallest hill is like, something like 600 feet. So quite different on the geography there. But
Yeah, and weather, I don't know how different the weather is for you, but it's typically on the damper side here in the Pacific Northwest. So what I've noticed that's funny about that is when you post videos online or pictures online with your equipment out in the elements, everybody freaks out. Hey, you need to cover that thing, put an umbrella on that. And, my experience in the Pacific Northwest has been that nobody cares about that. We say, well, we have gear that's rated for weather. I mean, it's not waterproof, but it's highly water resistant. And so we just run it out there. You don't rules are you don't box it wet. You dry it
mhm.
off and before it goes back in the case and latched up. But if you follow those rules, at least I haven't had any problems, or most of the companies I've worked for never seen any problems related to rain being an issue for any of the gear that we use.
Will you guys even in like a torrential downpour? Will you work in that with probably GPS maybe, but a total station?
I'd say it's up, depends on the company and how critical the mission and timeline is. As a private surveyor running my own business, well, we try to avoid torrential downpours. The nice thing about the weather here is typically the the volume of rain isn't as high as in the Midwest, or I've been to Texas where it's just coming down so crazy that I wouldn't consider surveying in it. But in Oregon, it tends not to be as intense and, very sporadic sometimes. So yeah, it's like if the rule was you couldn't get the instrument wet, then we wouldn't get work done here.
Yeah, I believe it. For us out here, it's kind of like you said, it depends on the company, what kind of damage they're willing to take to their equipment or risk that they're willing to take with the equipment. I've worked at places where we did totally work in torrential downpours, maybe not with the total station. You put the umbrella on the total station, but definitely GPS. And then I've worked at other places where it was like, if there's so much as a little bit of spittle from the sky, then there's no work being done. Now, that was a government job, but that's always different.
Yeah. I know the guys in Florida seem to be real sensitive to the rain. I guess that works. But for me, I think I would run into profitability issues if
Yeah.
if we were unable to work at all.
Yeah. I'm sure you guys, it's pretty wet out there, right? Even if it's not of great volumes, it's high in frequency. Is that correct?
Yeah, it depends on the season. Wintertime, it's typically wet. Summertime, it'll get up to 100 degrees, in June and July, and you won't see rain for a long time. But, we get a little snow here in the winter sometimes. This year's been remarkably dry, which has been fantastic for field surveying. Not so good for our reservoirs.
Oh, yeah, sure. I bet. We've had the opposite. It's been one of the worst years for snow. For us, we had back in early January, over the course of a couple weeks, there was 14 inches down in Indianapolis, and then we're up where I am in Fort Wayne. We had 9 or 10 inches, I believe. So I don't remember the last time it snowed that much here. But yeah, funny story. I met a guy recently who did some work up in the Upper Peninsula in Michigan, and he was telling me they, over the course of a winter, got 30 feet of snow. And I don't even know how to fathom that. But talk about crazy surveying up there.
Sounds like you should start a ski resort.
That's right. Yeah. Yep. He said even after it compacted over time, it was still like 9 feet tall, which is it's unimaginable. Yeah.
Mm. Tough to recover monuments in those conditions.
Yeah, that's for sure. I can't even imagine the drifting. You'd probably have some areas that are 15, 20 feet tall drifting even after a lot of it's compacted, which is, yeah, pretty interesting.
So as far as other terrain challenges, do you guys have anything there?
For us, it's mostly just the classic, big tree in the way, the solar issues, which everybody has to deal with. I mean, I think Indiana is probably one of the most ideal places to survey. I mean, if you're in a forested area, you're always going to run into RTK issues, but that's just like anywhere. So nothing in particular that causes us grief out here besides our network having issues. So it's pretty flat.
Okay. You want to talk about deeds and LiDAR? Maybe some workflows?
Sure. Let's see. How easy is it for you guys to get deed records, public deed records?
So our deed records are recorded at the counties, and of course you can go in physically and get those documents, pay a few bucks to get a copy of one. I would say what most surveyors typically do is get them online via either a paid service or potentially free service. I have a free service that I use, for 99% of the deeds that I need, which is I just go put in the address and hit request the trio, and they kick back this trio, which has ownership information, property details, tax information, but it also has the last vesting deed. So that's typically the way that we're getting our deeds. There is the situation sometimes where it won't return a deed, or, if it's old, or sometimes if it's owned by an LLC, they won't kick it out right away. So I might have to go back to the title company and say, hey, can you get me the last vesting deed for this one? Or, in deeded properties where we're having to consider junior, senior rights, then, getting deeds for the surrounding properties, or sometimes chain of title is important. That one's always important for a title report for land divisions, and uncovering easements, which, can come into play from everything from development to property line adjustment. Typically, we need to know easements for those, so that when we're moving a line, that we're not causing any problems with the existing easements.
Do you guys have online records of everything, very, very far back, or is there a certain date to which you don't have online records anymore?
Yeah, as far as surveys and plats go, the county has went back and recorded and added older documents over the years to it. We can get plats that were done in these 1890s, right after the GLO came through here in the 1870s. We have, whole city and town plats around that time and the early 1900s. Kind of interesting what they did here after the GLO came in and did set all the PLSS corners is the county surveyors were tasked with mapping out the counties, the private ownership. And so often we'll see these old surveys from the early 1900s that are in bad shape, might have pretty sparse notes, but it's the county surveyor going through these sections methodically and mapping out, here's where all the private property is. Of course, the land claims grants that came in, we call them donation land claims, kind of like the ranchos in California. And I don't know what some of the other states call it, but that was the federal government disposing of that public land to private interest, and they were giving these land grants. So when people settled it out here, they actually didn't have title to the property. They had this grant that says, hey, you're owed this amount of property. It was different if you were married or single. And then their task was to go survey that, lay it out and occupy it, farm it. And that's what they did. So later the title happened, through these surveys when the county surveyor went through and mapped out at the private ownership. And I assume there was a lot of deeds written around that time as well.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. We have a pretty similar situation as regards online access to records, although ours are not free. There's no free service in any counties that I work in. Even some of them, you have to pay the service center $8 per search. So even if you get a bad search, then you wasted $8, and then you have to pay an additional, I believe it's $1 per page. So it can kind of rack up on some of these counties out here if we're doing online records. So fairly frequently we have our guys, if they're going in the field, our guys who also know how to do research, they will do research in the courthouse itself or the recorder's office if it's separate from the courthouse. So that's a big issue we have. Another big issue we have is really illegible plats that are scanned in. I don't know if you guys have that issue out there, but just mostly they're from before 1960, especially once you get into the 1920s. Just the scans are horrible of those plats, and probably the originals. A lot of them aren't that great either. Either the original copies were lost and they've just been copied to extinction almost, and then that copy of a copy was scanned in finally. But but besides having to pay a lot for even just simple research, it's the illegibility is difficult as well. So
I imagine that throws some wrenches into your workflow when crew is going out to pull that stuff, either, before they hit the field or whatever, and they got some horrible documents, and now it's like, all right, we don't have the records we need to be able to do a proper retracement here.
Right. And of course it's always difficult without being able to draft up, legal descriptions as you get them. If you're just in the courthouse and you have no access to drafting services, then you're kind of just, you're hoping that this is the right one because it matches what the tax documents say or what GIS says. But sometimes those records can be wrong, and we'll get back and, the deed has a legal description in it that's for 3 miles away. And, it's because somebody in the GIS department, just fat thumbed the wrong document number in there. So we have a lot of issues with public records. Not nearly as bad as some places. I know there are some places, some counties in Indiana where they have hardly any records that have been digitized. So that would be, I've yet to work in one of those counties, but that would not be super fun. So,
wow. Yeah. Yeah. As far as legibility, I'd say ours are pretty good. You run into some every once in a while that are not so great. And of course, a lot of these old plats aren't going to close, and they're going to have errors in them that you got to figure out. what are we doing with that during the boundary resolution?
Right. Yeah, we had just in December, we had a project come in that was for a plat that, every single dimension on it, there were no bearings whatsoever. There was only distances. Every distance was just to the nearest foot. And this plat was from the 50s, so it's not like it was super old. The surveyor just did not do a very good job. And lo and behold, the possession did not match anything whatsoever in this block. I mean, it was an irregular block. It wasn't rectangular. And that was quite a treat trying to work through that survey. The amount of field work was staggering compared to what we proposed. But you know what? Sometimes you gotta eat those jobs, and you learn from them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the name of the game, right? Always be getting better at your estimating in your proposals to limit your risk, for sure.
Right. Do you give estimates or do you give quotes, Nick?
Well, mine are always called estimates, and I would say for the most part, we treat them like a fixed fee contract, but there's also that wiggle room in the case where, we need to do significantly more work, or if the client requests some addition to the scope, then those are times when they might get a higher invoice than what was estimated. But we're always trying to communicate that. And, if we're in the field and they ask us to do some extra stuff, then the crew will just check in and say, hey, they asked to do this. And okay, well, we're going to need to charge some more money for that. So tell them it'll be this much.
Yeah. Yeah. We come across that every once in a while where we have to go back and request more, but most of our stuff is just fixed fee. Yep.
Yeah. For residential, that seems to be the way to go,
Right.
Especially for homeowners, they're spending thousands of dollars on a survey. It's significant for them. And, if it goes from 3,000 to 5,000 and they weren't expecting that could be a deal breaker. So trying to not communicate that and then just drop that on at the end seems like a big potential for a gap in expectations.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And bad reviews, not to mention. So
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
sure.
Unless you're really good at communicating that value, then bad reviews are probably a big risk in that situation.
Yeah, definitely.
What else should we talk about?
Let's see. What's the most ridiculous request you've ever received for a survey?
The ones that I feel are most ridiculous are when there's a dispute or the neighbors have been fighting about it. Every once in a while, you'll get this request where, like, I need you to determine this line, and I want to know if my neighbor's fence that he just built is over it even a quarter inch. It's just like this ultimate, this infinitesimal line, and you've breached that line, and now we have problems. Or now we have another reason to fight about our problems.
Right. Right. And those clients are quite a treat when that occurs, because they treat their neighbor that way. There's a good chance that they're going to treat you as their surveyor that way, just as the nitpicky and the trying to grab every little thing they can. It's just some people are like that. Yeah, I had one last year where a lady called in, and the older lady, and she was really harping on just like how accurate really is this line that you staked. And I was like, well, ma'am, like, there's some uncertainty, and we have standards for that uncertainty. And I gave her what the number was on the uncertainty of that line, and she was like, well, how can you call yourself a surveyor if you can't tell me literally exactly where this line is to the infinitesimal, as you would say? So, some people, they think that it's just as easy as going out there and finding the pins, and there you go. And then and then they know exactly where their line is for all of eternity. But lo and behold, those clients who ask, hopefully we educate them. And that client in particular ended up being really grateful and actually somebody who we've worked with again. So yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, expectations, that seems like the name of the game, for the modern surveyor is managing that up front because the landowners, they just have no idea how we do our job, what we do, why are we so expensive, why does it take so long? And then as you're talking about, if you get some sort of conflict in the evidence, you got some evidence that says, well, the boundary could be here, or it could be here, or could be over here. The way that we've been handling that is, if the evidence is clear where the line is, they got monuments, they match record, occupation and improvements match that line, then, hey, no problem here. But in those cases where we have that conflict, then, we're going back to the landowner and saying, we have this conflicting evidence, and we actually can determine your boundary line, but you guys can fix this problem. In fact, you're the only ones as the private landowners that can solve this problem. So what do you want to do with it? And, the first question they always ask is, well, what do you mean we can figure this out? I'm like, yeah, there's a couple of different tools that we can use to, agree on the line or adjust the line. But, as a surveyor, I don't have the authority to say, well, the boundary line's here, but when it's clearly disrespecting, these longstanding improvements, or, possibly there was an agreement on this line that we just don't have evidence of outside of the improvements, that's a situation where we're very reluctant to go stick our foot in the pie and set rods, or, stake a line that doesn't agree with the improvements. So that's kind of our process of putting it back on them and trying to get them to work it out so that whenever they decide and that we document, everybody's in agreement with it.
Yeah, we have a mechanism in Indiana called a legal survey. I would imagine it's something akin to what I understand a lot line adjustment to be out west. You can correct me on this, but for us, the legal survey is essentially both property owners have to agree on the line. There's a note. Well, actually, they don't even both have to agree. There's a notice that's sent out, and if they don't respond to that notice within a certain statutory period, then the legal survey of where that line is goes into effect, and it gets recorded, it gets not recorded, but filed at the county surveyor's office, and then that line is the true legal line then from that point. So I'm not sure if you guys have something similar to that.
So from the surveyor perspective, it's like, I did the survey, I came up with this, and now we're going to give the other side some time to challenge that before we file the survey.
Yeah. And there's I can't remember them off the top of my head, but there's very specific notices that have to be sent out in very specific time periods in which those owners can respond or dispute those notices. And then if they don't within the period, then it goes into effect. Yeah.
That's interesting. Have you ever had one of those where they don't do it on time, and then they come back a couple days later and say, hey, I got a problem here, and it's already done. Sorry.
I've only been involved in one of those legal surveys one time, and I was still an SI at that point, or whatever you call it, SIT, LSIT, before I was fully licensed. So I wasn't entirely involved in the process. I know that both sides agreed upon it and it went through perfectly fine. But since then, I've yet to have a situation that wasn't able to be resolved with having to go to that extent of a legal survey. It is kind of like a last resort. And I know a lot of surveyors who have never done one in Indiana, just because usually there's other ways we can go about resolving the issue. But it is a lot better than both parties going to litigation, that's for sure. So.
Right. Yeah. Here, the idea of a property line adjustment is that we're going to transfer some property, right? Whether I'm giving you a sliver or whether, we're changing the angle of this line so that I give you some and you give me some, but we're trying to move this line and adjust the title to match that.
Ah,
So,
okay.
so with a record of survey, which is our, sort of base survey that we can file with the county, that doesn't adjust title at all. If I go set a monument that's a foot off of a deed distance, that doesn't change the title. They still have the same deed in the title record with, this meets and bounds description. And, on the other side of that, if we were to just quit claim that strip of land that we want to transfer, then they'll actually, record that in the title record and the assessor will make a new tax lot for that piece of property, but it's not attached to their existing home property. So there is that conflict there. If they go to try to sell the property, well, they could sell both pieces, but they're not together. It didn't change the size of their initial property. They can't build across that line. And so the idea with the property line adjustment is we're not creating any new parcels. We are going to convey property, but we're going to keep the, same two parcels and we're just moving the line. And so to do that, they require that, number one, you put in an application with the jurisdiction, whether that's the city or the county. And so they get a chance to approve that and say, yeah, you can move the line. Usually with that, they're going to want a site map that shows the boundaries, where's all the structures, dimensions to the structures. And that way they can make sure that this adjustment meets the current zoning. Utilities, easements as well. That's another thing that we have to show on a property line adjustment. But then once the county reviews it, we prepare a draft deed that goes along with that with the new legal description for both properties. And then once we get the red lines back, usually we make any edits to that, send it off to an attorney to draft a deed. And then that deed gets recorded in the title record first. And then we come behind that with the record of survey and we put in that recording number from the new deed onto the face of the survey, usually spanning both properties and the transfer parcel. And now there's one document in the title record that has this exhibit A of the transfer parcel and then an exhibit B and C, which are the results and descriptions for the other two.
Got it. Okay. Now, is that a statewide process that every county follows that pretty much that exact same series of events?
Pretty much. They all have their own flavor of the checklist. So it's not something in statute that's blanket for every jurisdiction. So there are minor variances in what they might want shown during the application and or the order in which stuff gets submitted and recorded. Sometimes that can change, but yeah, the property line adjustment is talked about in ORS 92, which is our same statute that talks about subdivisions and partition plats. Partition plats is just a smaller subdivision, 3 lots or less.
Got it. Okay. So that is statewide, the requirement that like a smaller plat is 3 lots or less. That's interesting. Yeah. Out here, it's pretty much when you're splitting properties up, it really varies depending on the county, what the process is. So it pretty much all follows a similar trajectory as what you stated. You're going to do your survey showing where the split is, writing a new legal description for that split, and then that legal description and survey gets recorded with the deed. That's essentially what happens. But then there's, as you said out there, there's also here different requirements per county that can make things easier or more difficult. I even have one county that requires you to have soil borings done if you want to split a property depending on the size of it, which is pretty unique.
Yeah, I bet the clients love to hear the cost for that one in order to divide their lot, huh?
Yeah. I've had some clients who are definitely not too happy about that.
Cool. Is there any situation out there that you can go move a line or split a property by just doing your record of survey, filing your survey, no review process?
Not that I am aware of. Not that I am aware of. There could be some loophole, but I've yet to experience it where it's that simple.
I know when, I've talked to surveyors all over the US and some of the Midwestern states, it seems like, or I don't know, I don't want to qualify just them, but there seems like some states where, there's just a lot less oversight. You don't need all these applications and fees. You say you want to split the property and the surveyor comes out and surveys it and sets the monuments, files their survey, and there you go.
Yeah. I mean, here I think it's definitely simpler than where you are. Like I said, it's pretty much just we do the survey and then it gets, depending on the county might review it. I think all the counties I work in review them, and then it gets recorded. The survey gets recorded and it gets put into the deed with a new legal description that also gets recorded in the deed. So yeah, but it's not like, if what I understand your question is saying some other states do, it's not like we can just do a survey, write a legal description, and record the survey itself, and then it becomes title. There still needs to be the deed with the legal description there. I mean, I'd be,
And that's
is
probably
that
the
what you
case.
mean?
I would assume that you probably need the deed recorded in those cases. But
Right.
anyways, my comment is just from the people I've talked to that, they ask like, why are you going through all this stuff to do the land division? It's so easy. You just go out and survey it and set it. It's like, well, no, if we're going to do that, we have to get this thing approved first. And that's going to be an expensive, time consuming application up front where ultimately the jurisdiction can still say no. Or more commonly, they say, yeah, you can do it, but with these conditions of approval. For instance, I have one client that decided to do a 2-lot partition. I'm going to turn this, 5 acres into 2 lots, and they're at the end of a dead end road. And when we put in the application, county says, yep, you can do it, but you need to do offsite improvements along this. And so when they looked at, the cost of building the sidewalk and curb and gutter down this dead end street where there's no other sidewalk or other improvements like that, they looked at that and go, well, that's going to be expensive. And the county says, well, you can pay a fee in lieu of that. That's 50 grand or 60 grand, whatever it was. That's so big. Nobody in their right mind is going to think, okay, I want to turn my lot into 2. That's going to cost me $100,000. Nobody's going to think that,
Right. Exactly.
But as a surveyor, we got to tell them these things and say, well, there may be some other consultants that you might need on this project. You might need a planner involved. You might need an engineer. We don't know how long it's going to take. A lot of that comes down to how long does the government take to process it? And are there any hangups? Is the application complete the first time? Otherwise, they're going to deny it, kick it back. And, all of that affects the timetable.
Do your municipalities, do they have quick response times, or are they pretty slow?
Not bad, I'd say.
Okay.
Not bad.
A week or so?
Some counties are faster at getting red lines back. When it comes to planning and applications, those tend to take longer than the surveyor. They're different offices, different functions. But yeah, I'd say they're fairly reasonable.
Okay. It's not like California where they have months and months of waiting. I've heard horror stories, at least, of over there.
Oh, no, definitely not months. What about on your side?
Yeah, we're, relatively speaking, we're fairly quick. Seems like most applications get approved within a few weeks, if not a week. So yeah, I'm usually not on that side of it so much. I'm, that we kind of hand that off to the developer or the client, and then they deal with the permitting there and whatever applications they need to go through.
Got it. Well, any other items that you want to hit on before we wrap it?
I don't think so. This has been a pretty good run, 48 minutes. That's great.
Yeah. Maybe I can close with talking a little bit about the Surveyor's Quest idea and where we're trying to go with that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Well, getting you involved in this, for me, that's a great step forward. We've started, creating the the social accounts and the brand and the courses for Surveyor's Quest, really the idea is super simple. It's let's show video ads to kids in high school that are getting ready to make that decision of, do I want to go to college or do I want to enter the workforce with the skills that I have now? And sharing with them the opportunity of surveying, the money, the professional status, the adventure, I think are the sort of the three top elements that make sense to get them excited about it. The idea is that once they get involved or respond to advertising for Surveyor's Quest, they come into the community and get paired up with a mentor in their state that can direct them to, down a path that makes sense for them, whether it's, hey, let's just start getting entry-level work at a company, maybe an internship, or maybe it's the combination education, surveying experience route, which seems available in a lot of states now. That for me is, I think, the most exciting opportunity, and what I'm telling, new students about, or new high school kids, which is, you can work part-time for a company that sponsors you while you do the online education. And, on non-field days, you can use the equipment to do labs, and we can help you with that. But that sponsorship to get them into the online program, as well as getting real world experience at the same time. I mean, I wish I was able to do something similar like that when I went to school, rather than just front loading, 4 or 5 years of education and then getting kicked out into the workforce. There's gaps when you do it that way, right? Like, you come out with all this theory and think that you know about
Yep.
surveying, and then you realize how it's actually done in practice, and your boss he says, well, what are they teaching you in school, man? That's not how we do it here. There's that catch up or that learning curve as you sort of realize that, okay, I was exposed to a lot of theory, and of course the math is still going to be true, but a lot of the stuff that we do is not math.
Right. Exactly. There's a lot of legal stuff in there, a lot of just things that really take experience in order to understand what's going on. And I can second that. As I'm only a year into my license, and it was only 7, 8 years ago that I started the whole process to get into surveying. So you learn what you learn in school, and then when you get out, you have to relearn everything, and you have to forget some things, even not because they were bad, but because experience is an even better teacher. And so.
Cool. Well, maybe we can have some more of these chats and get some content out there for people to look at, and hopefully that can attract some more mentors to the cause, so that we can start filling out a list of mentors and get more states covered to be able to direct these students, to down the right path, whatever that is for them.
Yeah. And I guess, Nick, before we end, was there anything that you want to say to people that are thinking about getting into surveying, like or something that really entice you into it?
Hmm. Well, if you consider the engineering fields and civil engineering, that job is going to get you stuck behind the CAD program for most of your career. Of course, you're going to have management at some point when you can reach that level, but that's the big part of the job. Whereas surveying, I think that attracts people that have the desire to get outside or not be chained to the desk, and have that variety during their week where they're in the field, being physical, swinging a hammer, swinging a machete, and hiking mountains. And then other days they're downloading data and drawing maps and building 3D models. So, that variety, I think, is what attracted me, and the outside component to it. But anymore, the tech is amazing, right? We got not just the centimeter level RTK and the robotic total stations, but now we're flying drones with photo and LiDAR payloads, and connecting and collecting just these amazing data sets. It's like the first time you get a dense LiDAR point cloud in a 3D viewer and start spinning around, your mind's just like, oh, wow, I didn't know this was possible. I'm used to Google Earth. So, that's the other thing I'd mention to him is the tech's super cool. Maybe some people have jobs where they just fly drones. That's probably not a small survey company, but doing it as part of the overall workflow and tasks that we do, I think that's been a cool addition to surveying.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. It really brings what we do to life to a lot of people when they see that, like you said, the dense point cloud on a screen and they see all this captured data. Now it's then our job to filter that and make it actually usable for the client. But it is really, really enticing for sure. And I think the groups that go to, college fairs or job fairs, things like that show that LiDAR data, show just the equipment to these prospective surveyors and students, that it really helps to give them that enticement, basically. Yeah, for me, what really got me into surveying was actually very similar to you. I mean, I was in an engineering program, and I said, I really don't think I can sit behind a desk for the rest of my life. And I also love the legal side of surveying. It's kind of a right brain, left brain kind of thing for me. I love that balance of, yeah, you got to know your math really well. You got to know your physics really well, but also you have to know the law really well and how to defend yourself and the work that you've done in a report for whatever survey you're doing, being able to articulate that in such a way that it can be held up in court. And that side of it also is really a joy to me. So that balance of right brain, left brain, the balance of office and field, I just think there's nothing like it. It's an amazing career. And I know there's some people who they want to be at a desk their whole lives and they want to, just kind of devote themselves to that. But I would go nuts. So this is the career for me. That's for sure.
I agree. I'm in the same boat. I get bored when I'm doing the same thing for too long. One other thought I did have on that, which I think is timely, is the idea of AI and looking at all the jobs that are getting wiped out and replaced by AI and people that are using AI, right? We're not losing our jobs to AI. We're losing our jobs to people that know how to use AI and leverage AI. And, we've had some discussion in the community about it recently, but I feel like the fact that we go do this physical thing out in the field, we, dig a 2 or 3 foot hole to find these iron pipes and iron rods that have been underground for many years. And, that a lot of what we do is not easily replaced by AI. So for kids that are considering, how do I hedge my bet against investing in an education that's just going to get automated away, it really feels like this is one that is going to have some of the most staying power. What do you think?
I wholeheartedly agree. As much as we're biased, I do agree that I think that surveying, at least certain parts of surveying, will outlast AI. I mean, there's always going to be, I think every profession is going to have some sort of encroachment by it. Like, for example, we may see in the future, and we're seeing it now, where topographic surveys, for example, have become much, much more automated than they used to be in the past, whether that's the fieldwork side of it on certain aspects or the office work side of it. AI is only going to continue helping that. However, the boundary side, I don't see any possible way in which that can be replaced, because it's not just math. It's professional judgment, first and foremost. It's professional judgment combined with math and law. And the application of law is always it's never something you can teach an algorithm. You can teach it principles, but just like with anything on the, what would you say, on the non-mathematical side of things, it's not algorithmic by nature. So I think in that sense, we're very safe from the AI onslaught, you might say. And that's honestly, that's the main reason that I love surveying is that side of it, the non solely mathematical side.
Very cool. Well, that was a fun chat. Thanks for getting on and spending some time with me.
Yeah, likewise, Nick. Thank you.